Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a live stream where I'm going to talk to you about military aid to Ukraine. Because there is a lot of military aid news to share with you. It has been a pretty crazy couple of days in that respect. So we'll get to that shortly. I just want to say welcome on board, team members. I appreciate your viewership. Thank you to all the members here. And always an absolute privilege to speak to all of you. But members do help support the channel, so thank you so much. I don't thank you enough. That's why I'm doing this. And thank you to all the people who have supported me in all the many ways that you have. So just a big thanks. I don't do it enough. So there you go. Uber. Thank you. Right, let's start then with some military news. So it's going to be quite an information-packed military news video, like they often are. I'm going to put the chat to the side. If you have, great questions and comments, I'm going to struggle to see them, but I will try and keep half an eye on what is going on. We're going to talk military aid, as I said, and there's quite a bit of info. So we will start with Ramstein. So the new Ramstein meeting will take place on June the 4th at NATO headquarters in Brussels. So that is awesome news that is going to be on the cards. Now, I believe it's going to be the UK, but I think, is it Germany that will be running it as well? Yeah, UK and Germany. So UK and Germany going to be initiating that and controlling that. So good news. Germany, I really get a sense that Germany's on board. And it's very interesting to hear that Friedrich Merz is going to be visiting Washington next week. Now, I imagine he will be half expecting an ambush, because every leader seems to get an ambush at the moment, unless you are a dictator wannabe like Bukele from El Salvador. But generally speaking, if you're a democratically elected leader, you're going to be in for a hard time when you go to the Oval Office. So I hope that Merz is, I'm sure he will be very well prepared, and I hope he stands firm and really stands up for Europe and for Ukraine, and Europe in supporting Ukraine. So yeah, that's going to be taking place on the 4th of June. So really quite soon. We're on the 31st of May as I speak. Let's get real. European officials abandon hope for US backing in Ukraine, say the Rearmament press. I mentioned this morning. It's worth mentioning now in the context of aid to Ukraine. So European officials have quietly shifted from deploying troops, peacekeeping troops, so that was a big conversation topic. It was going to be the coalition of the willing, UK, France, and other nations coming in to supply peacekeeping troops, given a ceasefire was supposedly imminent. I mean, it wasn't really. And now we're moving back to supporting Ukraine militarily, because it doesn't look like Russia is remotely interested in peace, and therefore a peacekeeping force is not going to be needed. There's unlikely to be a ceasefire. Now, they've shifted from deploying peacekeeping troops to providing long-term military support for Ukraine without US involvement. And the idea here is, let's get real, is that the Europeans are now recognizing more formally that the US is not going to be on board with supporting Ukraine. I just noticed this, Paul Gilbert. So somebody said, Paul Gilbert, not somebody, community leaderboards, that's new. So at the top of the, I don't really know, there's like, people have got like hashtags next to them as number 1, 2, and 3. I don't know what that means, whether it's just that you arrived here first, or I know nothing about that, but all exciting YouTubey stuff. Okay, so we hear that, and in concert with that, the UK and other European countries have no plans to deploy troops to Ukraine anytime soon. And that is coming from British Army Colonel Richard Kemp. He's retired, I believe so. But anyway, I assume he's in the know. Yeah, no plans afoot as it stands to supply troops to Ukraine. People might not have got a notification for this video, because I literally just decided to do it, as I've got too much info at the moment to just do in a single video. It just takes too long, and I just thought, let's do a a live stream. So there you go. That's why you wouldn't have got a notification. So Ursula von der Leyen has called for European independence through defense spending and Ukraine membership. European Commission President announced that the EU is enabling up to 800 billion euros in defense funding as part of the broader independence strategy, defense strategy. This is the Rearm Europe. This is good news. That seems to be coming along just fine at the moment. So that is now, it looks like all the ducks are in a row with regard to that kind of funding. It will primarily be borrowing. I think they changed the borrowing rules with regard to expenditure on defense, and they will have very low preferential borrowing, I presume, to allow people to rack up better debts than they'd otherwise have in the name of rearming Europe and supporting Ukraine. So fantastic. Right, moving on. Ukraine's IT coalition has already secured nearly 1.1 billion euros in support. Defense Minister Rustem Umerov reports under NATO NSPA coordination. This funding, 2024 to 2025, enhances secure battlefield communication, expands a Delta system. It develops digital tools like Oberig, Army Plus, and Reserve Plus. I don't know Oberig, but these kind of Army Plus, Reserve Plus are the sort of apps that you can use to register and effectively sign up or know what's going on with regard to recruitment and whatnot. They're very IT savvy, the Ukrainians. They have a centralized government app for like loads of stuff, and it's actually really good. It's really well received. That kind of carry on, whereas people in other nations might be a bit like, oh, too much data in the hands of the government or too much government control or whatever. But actually the Ukrainians have embraced that fairly successfully, and they're using these kind of apps in so many different contexts, as you can see. But that's impressive. But there's an IT coalition that has raised that much money, and that will help definitely in things like the development of Delta. Delta is something that Ukrainians have as an advantage over the Russians, I would wager. So that's good news. Ukraine has asked Turkey to invest in the domestic military industrial complex as well as provide air defense systems and ammunition for them. They are looking to other places in the absence of US support in terms of widespread military aid. Turkey has got a vastly improving, not just improving, but increasing in output military industrial complex. And I think it's probably quite clever to draw on Turkey. That will form a closer relationship between the two nations. And Turkey is, as we know, this nation that straddles the fence quite successfully between Russia and Ukraine. Bear with me 2 ticks. Sorry about that. A shouting child on Siege is always a pleasure, never a chore. Yeah, so Turkey, I think it's great stuff. It's clever for the Ukrainians to get them involved, and in fact, there was a meeting between, or a press conference. Is it Fidias or Fidas? No, Fidias is the Cypriot MEP. I forget his name, but the foreign minister for Turkey, and that's the foreign minister Andriy Sybiha for Ukraine. Ukraine now produces 40% of its own military needs, says Foreign Minister Sybiha. Ukraine has become a global leader in drone technology and has scaled up military equipment production by up to 35 plus. I presume that's 35%. He added that Ukraine aims for greater self-sufficiency and reduced dependency on foreign supplies. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. We're going to go on to Ukrainian indigenous production in a second. But let's go back to Turkey here. So I just wanted to show that because that was them together. We understand that from that meeting, Belgium and Turkey have joined the International Drone Coalition for Ukraine. So Turkey really are looking like they're going to be an important supporter of Ukraine. Fascinating. And the drone coalition as well is super important. Now they're going to be thinking, right, that might get us to, you know, it's no such thing as a free lunch. What do they get out of it? And you hope that they're not getting intel that they're passing on to the Russians and all that kind of stuff. But they will be using this as a means to get stuff like Bayraktar drones and Baykar equipment out there and get recognition as well from other nations. They'll be working probably with other nations, I guess. And it's all, I would have thought, mutually beneficial for these nations to do this. So led by Latvia and the UK, it does bring the total number of participating countries up to 20. So that is pretty good there. Right, moving on, we're actually staying on drones, but moving to the next topic. So back to Ukrainian indigenous production. In 2025, says Trent Telenko, Ukraine is making more FPV drones than it is artillery shells. Plus the ISW is telling, so the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, is telling Western publics that drones are killing twice as many targets as every other weapon system on the Ukrainian battlefield combined. Really significant effect and usage the drones are having. Usage, I mean, I was kind of talking about this in my first video today. Functional usage of drones, they are doing everything on the battlefield. They are kind of substituting for humans, they're substituting for artillery, they're substituting for mortars, they're substituting for aviation to some degree, and for just general reconnaissance as well. They are doing it all. Are they doing it as effectively? Well, I don't know. It's going to be effectiveness compared to cost. And when you're talking about heavy drones dropping bombs, they're probably not going to be as effective as the guided glide bombs from aviation, but they're going to be a damn sight cheaper. So yeah, where are the Western military procurement programs of record to buy 1 million FPV munitions? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? I was seeing a comment that the French were implementing 3D printers to make drones, just basically taking what is being observed, you know, learning from the Ukrainian battlefield and the Ukrainian war, and taking it and apply it to their own armed forces. But other nations are still like buying drones for like 50 grand a pop or whatever, where you could print them yourselves for much cheaper. And so France is doing a good job there. I can't remember whether it's Canada or the United States, which was still trying to be a bit old school and a bit un-Ukrainian about it. It's like France seemed to be saying, right, no, we're going to look at what Ukraine are doing and we're going to learn some lessons from that. So we have Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister here saying, and there have been a couple of, I think is this one in Singapore, a defense conference in Singapore, which appears to be kicking out quite a lot of content. I don't know if it's that same one, because this was yesterday. Yeah, I'm sure it will be. It's going on today as well. Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff coming out from there. Not least Emmanuel Macron, I think, was there, and some was saying that he made the best speech he's ever made or something. So I have to look into that. Again, giving some props to the French here. I mean, who knew? But the Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister there says his country is producing 10 million drones per year. Now, I mentioned this morning as well, because I was like, wow, we had heard that they're hoping to get to 4 million drones. And then they're hoping to get 5 million drones this year. And then suddenly to see that doubled, that is absolutely phenomenal if it is true. 10 million drones per year. Now, drones do 80% of damage on a battlefield, he says. So that's kind of that's confirming what we were just hearing. Ukrainian-made FPVs are $500 a pop, he says, in contrast to $1,500 for foreign models. So, you know, much better that they buy their own. Make their own. Low-cost interceptor drones are at $5,000, are an affordable alternative to traditional surface-to-air missile systems. So again, drones replacing aviation, replacing artillery and mortars and humans and reconnaissance and drone launching platforms and surface-to-air missile systems. They're doing everything, aren't they? Pretty incredible. We are going to return to drones in the context of Russia a little bit later. because there are some claims that China are now not selling Mavic drones to Ukraine, and that means all of them will go to China. And as I said before, well, I'm now talking about what I was going to talk about later. You may think it's an advantage that Ukraine makes all their own, and it is. But the ramification of that is if they start demanding less from China, then China's still producing all those drones. They still have that capacity, and Russia will just soak that all up. They'll say, "Oh, Ukraine was ordering, 5,000 drones off you a month. We're gonna have some of that. Thank you very much indeed." And so I think that could end up giving Russia quite the drone. Well, I don't know if advantage is the right word. They're suddenly going to find themselves with a lot more drones than they were having. Ukrainian drone complex here, equipped with a guided FPV missile drone to destroy Russian drones. Wow. So we've got a mother drone with an interceptor drone that's designed to, and I've seen that drone before. Is that the one that can that take off vertically? I don't know. Anyway, I've seen that side. Yeah, you got a mothership drone carrying a drone to destroy drones. It's all about drones. I mean, soon enough, this war will just be drone on drone war. I'm going to talk about tacos a bit later. Actually, would anyone like some taco? I think that is pretty good outcome from the last couple of days, because I think that will smart and it will stick. Right, staying on drones, I did mention this the other day, but Magyar, in fact, Magyar has just released his success stats. I probably should show you this. Here it is, actually. I've just got it here. That was a bit random. So he's just released his stats. I was going to share this with you in the hits and losses tomorrow. May 2025 combat report shared by Birds of Magyar unit. So the total for May 2025, 2,221 Russian KIA and WIA, so killed in action, wounded in action. That is a 23% increase versus the month before, which is plus 417. So they are having a greater and greater effect. I don't know whether the unit is getting bigger, and that could confound the conclusions there, or whatever. But assume it's like for like, then that is really impressive. Up by almost a quarter. And the goal is to kill. I mean, it sounds pretty heinous to have this as kind of your target, but they are in the business of doing war. 100 Russian KIA, WIA a day, equating to 3,000 a month. So that's what he's planning on achieving. Yaga, as he says. Many people pointing that out. That's become a sort of thing now. His videos where he sort of famously, his voice and the way he speaks. Now, I reported the other day that one of his drones, supposedly, and this being a fiber-optic drone, hit a tank at 42 kilometers from the front line, which you'd assume means that range is up to 45, maybe even 50 kilometers. Because your drone operator is not going to be right on contact line. So if you have fiber-optic drones that can reach up to 50 kilometers, 45 to 50 kilometers, that is astonishing. Now, we are seeing fiber-optic drones being used more and more and more. And we are seeing loads of fiber-optic cables draping over trees and over fields, as I reported this morning. So good to know I'm not talking rubbish. That was a vertical takeoff drone that can do that as well. And Magyar says Jen Consensus, massive production facilities that he financed and built. So he is quite the fundraiser, Magyar. He's part of the advantage of Magyar is that he's generated the best teams, and it's a kind of virtuous cycle as far as they're concerned. The better they do, the better they get, and the more funding they get, the more presence online they get, the more funding they get. But he also does an enormous amount of fundraising himself, and they end up buying a load of kit kind of unilaterally, not through like central means, and that enables them to be pretty reactive and innovate themselves. They're not having to wait for centralized innovation and stuff to happen from government departments here and there. He's got teams working on creating new cutting edge stuff all the time. Okay, staying on Sorry, I'm just reacting to some of your comments here. Jenkins Census again. Combat Get is that Combat Vet Reacts. So Combat Vet, who's another YouTuber, was Combat Vet Reacts was just complaining about how dumb the US military is not adapting and using cheap FPV and recon bomber drones. Instead, they're buying $100 million units like Reapers. I mean, the UK has actually stopped doing that. We're just having a defense review, just about a strategic defense review is just coming out. It's a 48,000 word, 130-page review, and that will be looking directly at Ukraine war and what we are learning from it and what that means in terms of what our armed forces need to be looking like, what our main threats are. Now, one of the things we were doing before the war was spending inordinate amounts of money on big MQ-9 Reaper type drones and drone projects for these much larger drones. But I think we've realized, as far as I understand, there's a realization, especially with the UK being at the head of the drone coalition. And this is where the US, I'm going to just go back to just have a little chat now. This is where the US, I think, has made a strategic blunder. So because of Trump's desire to be ideologically aligned with Putin, what he's doing is he's screwing over his military and damaging their prospects going forward into the future. Because the US would surely love to be at the head of the drone capability, in fact, at the head of all of those capability coalitions, because like I've told you before, these aren't free lunches, right? Nations are getting involved in capability coalitions to help Ukraine because it helps them. So the UK and Latvia, being at the head of the drone capability coalitions, will be now swapping best practices, getting info, feedback from the front lines, innovation. So the UK will be in a position to be at the forefront of global drone technology and utilization on the front lines in any war that the UK is involved in, right? We are at the head of that because we want to get the most advantage for our armed forces. Now, it might cost us. The cost is, we are spending money on developing drones and giving them to Ukraine and helping out Ukraine as much as we can. So it comes at a cost, but the return on investment we get is Ukraine does well. So from a geopolitical point of view, we want Ukraine to prevail in war, right? So it achieves that for us, but we're also getting feedback on all that stuff I was saying so that we get the best drones so that our armed forces, that's Navy, Army and Air Force, all are going to gain from having the very best understanding of drone needs in the world, and Latvia as well. So the US, I think, are just missing out from saying, hey, we're going to be neutral, we're not going to be involved in capability coalitions, blah, 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 blah. All the rest of these European allies and other nations are helping out all these different ways. And the US is just, I don't know, I think getting just serially embarrassed personally, but that's just my opinion. Okay, right, just seeing so FPV drones, says Gen Consensus again, have become much more effective and costs have declined rapidly from $900 to $400 to $500 per unit. We've seen that throughout the course of the war, haven't we, where we were talking like sort of $1,000 for FPV drones. They're like $300 now for half decent FPV drones, and that's absolutely incredible. And also they're making bespoke munitions for them rather than taking RPG warheads and taking munitions off other devices or taking these munitions, but actually they're now creating bespoke ones for whatever job they want doing, and that of course makes it much more effective, doesn't it? Okay, right, so so as Dark Art Design says, I've worked within the military industrial complex for years. Just because they aren't talking about the development of certain systems doesn't mean they aren't pursuing them. I mean, everyone in the world is going to be paying as much attention as they can to the war in Ukraine. It's just going to be interesting to see, who can generate the most utility from the support that they are giving to Ukraine. Okay, the first batch of domestic UAT teaser. So these are Ukrainian provided vehicles, armored vehicles, has been delivered to Ukraine's defense forces. Built on a reinforced Toyota LC-79 chassis, it carries 4 personnel, including 2 crew, and up to 1,000 kilogram of cargo. Its real effectiveness will be proven in combat conditions. Armored vehicles with only 2 crew and 2 personnel. So I wonder what their design criteria would be, because that obviously not carrying an awful lot of people there. But anyway, it's good to see these bigger pieces of kit be produced by the Ukrainians for their own armed forces. Sorry, a little drinking respite. Now, Finland has launched a shelter coalition to support Ukraine. During a meeting in Kyiv, Prime Ministers Denis Shmyhal and Petteri Orpo signed documents formalizing the initiative. Ukraine aims to build 2,300 civil protection shelters by 2027 and 3,000 more by 2030. So these are obviously protections from drones and missiles, and that initiative is being led by Finland there. So they are obviously spearheading that, and you might wonder what they get from the civil protection shelter kind of coalition, and it might well be in order to build their own shelters back in Finland defensively, and out of caution in case Russia come their way at any point, but also could involve just I guess contracts for their own civil engineering firms and whatnot. Right. Okay, I mentioned this morning as well. So the MOD, the Ukrainian MOD, has signed a license agreement on the integration of the CRC system interface, which will allow for coordination and control between Ukrainian and NATO aircraft, NATO headquarters, ships, as well as air defense systems and radars. Now, I thought this was already in place, so I was a little bit confused. This is essentially looks like Link 16. But anyway, Ukrainian and NATO aircraft will now coordinate in a unified digital system. Ukraine has signed a license for NATO CRC system interface, CSI it's called, a key software for Link 16 military Wi-Fi, enabling real-time coordination between F-16s, Mirage 2000s, and air defense systems like Patriot. So as someone says, this is a big deal. But I actually just thought that was already in place. Someone says, I'm assuming this will be fitted to the 2 Saab 340 AEW and C, the kind of AWACS aircraft that Sweden is in the process of delivering to Ukraine for real-time integration with the F-16 and Mirage 2000s on combat missions. That is what I have heard, that it will be doing that. But yeah, I honestly just thought it was already in place. But I guess if it isn't in place, and that's going to be in place, then that will convey an advantage to a benefit to Ukraine. So they'll be able to work even more effectively than they presently are. So that will, I assume, possibly mean that F-16s and Mirages might be used more offensively, having the protection of a wider radar network rather than relying on their own individual radars. They're linking with all these other bits and pieces, as you can see from this kind of image. You've got, ships connected to aircraft, particularly these AWACS aircraft, to ground radar systems, all giving you network coverage so that a plane then can spot something maybe 200 kilometers away where their own internal radar wouldn't be able to do that. So their own internal radar has a range of, I'm making this up, but has a range of 100 kilometers, so that you wouldn't put them too close to the front line, because the Russians have a better aircraft capabilities in that respect. But if they can tap into the AWACS, then suddenly they're seeing 200 to 300 kilometers, and that means they can fire their beyond visual horizon, missiles. It all depends what the comparative range of their air-to-air missiles are with regard to the Russian aircraft. But yeah, so Ukraine has signed this agreement to use the Link 16 to integrate fighters with ADS. According to Chernogorenko, this is about the CRC-CSI system interface, which will allow, through the Link 16 data transfer protocol, to ensure the control of F-16 and Mirage 2000s with the Patriot air defense systems. So I don't know if anyone has anything to mention on that. Right. Yeah. Okay. So we will carry on. Right, Ukraine plans a full production of the Czech Bren 2 assault rifles. Czech sources confirm a gradual shift from simple licensed assembly to full production. So again, this is a case of localizing production of international pieces of kit. Here, small arms, super useful. Produce them in Ukraine, and that is also an advantage to the Czech provider, because they'd rather be the ones providing Ukraine manufacturing rights rather than any other company, so they make the money off that, and so on and so forth. Good news for Ukraine there. Right, some German aid to Ukraine information. Die Welt has exclusively published further details of the latest German military aid package, which was announced yesterday. I reported on that actually a couple of days ago. According to Welt, the announced financing of Ukrainian-made far-reaching weapons systems is about financing long-range attack drones and FPV interceptors with a sum of around 400 million euros supplied or being to be supplied. Specifically, the following models are involved: the AN-196 Luti, 2,000 kilometer range plus, and a BARS 800 kilometer range plus. So we had heard this actually, that the Luti ones, I think that's that one. It's the one with the two tails at the back that's kind of joined together. They're used very commonly by the Ukrainians, and they were asking, they'd actually approached, I think, Germany for this funding, and Germany has agreed. In addition, the VB-140 Flamingo with a range of up to 50 kilometers will also be financed. I presume that's this one here. The special thing about that is it is an interceptor drone. This drone will therefore be used for example to intercept Russian reconnaissance drones without the need to use expensive missiles. In addition, it was also announced that Germany will finance repair facilities for the German industry in Ukraine, according to Welt. This involves a contract with KNDS, which has not yet been finalized, to carry out the repair of KNDS vehicles. So there's a Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, the ATF Dingo mine-resistant and protection vehicles, the Panzer Howitzer 2000 self-propelled gun, and more. So all of that will be repaired in Ukraine if that contract gets finalized. All pretty good news. So the first batch of long-range weapons funded by Germany and produced in Ukraine could be ready within weeks, according to the German MOD. The systems are domestically made, already in service with the Ukrainian armed forces, and require no additional training. Mass production begins in 2025. What's reported there. So again, that could well be in reference to the Luti drones and the BARS drone there. I'm not aware of the BARS drone so much as the Luti, but yeah, all good. Right, moving on, but staying with drones. As early as 2025, so now, Ukraine will produce a lot of long-range weapons in which Germany will invest. The Ministry of Defense has said the first weapons for striking Russia will be ready in a few weeks. So that is more confirmation that they have they've already funded stuff that what they're funded will be actually used pretty damn soon. That one is the Luti there by the looks of it. Okay, so in an interview with RTL, says German aid to Ukraine, Zelensky announced during his visit to Germany that the subject of the delivery of the Taurus KPD 350 is apparently still on the table. We're hearing lots of mixed messages about this. It has so far been mentioned twice in talks between him and Chancellor Merz. Them both are still working in this direction. In an interview with ZDF Heute Journal, Chancellor Merz also does not rule out the delivery of Taurus to Ukraine in the future, and says it is within the realm of possibility. So it's not he doesn't sound like he's as adamant and positive on the supply of Taurus as he was before the election. And my guess is that he's got in, and people in the German MOD have said, yeah, no, the reason why we couldn't supply them before under Scholz is because of X, Y, and Z. And he's gone, oh, dang, I didn't know that before. Okay, we might have to sort of dial it back a bit, is my thought. So I know Olaf Scholz gets a lot of hassle for that. But like I was saying before, I've said before, the likelihood is there will be some kind of military strategic reason. Now, although he can overrule that, I would assume as Chancellor, of course he can. It's difficult when the military are the ones that know the deets a lot more than you will, and so you kind of quite beholden to what the military tell you about military hardware, right? In the interview, you also pointed out that this would require several months of training, which is why they're now providing assistance which helps Ukraine right now and not in half a year or a year. So they appear to be keener on supplying weapons that they've already got rather than training and the potential for Taurus at some point down the line. I wonder quite how many they are going to be able to give them if they are ever going to decide to do so, and it's probably not that many. More on this from No Reports here. Merz remains non-committal on Taurus missile deliveries to Ukraine, saying it's within the realm of possibility, but pointing out long training requirements. Instead, he stresses urgent military aid and deeper cooperation on long-range weapons agreed during talks with Zelensky in Berlin. So, yeah, it looks like he's trying to dial down on the Taurus thing. Italy has no plans, as we have actually already heard, to lift restrictions on supplying long-range weapons to Ukraine. Fatto Quotidiano reports, citing government sources, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has already voiced opposition to such deliveries last summer. Now, this is important because Italy has supplied some Scalp EGs, so Storm Shadow equivalents that the French and Italian use. And they have long said that you can't use these into Russia. They have to be used within occupied Ukraine. So that probably just means that if there are ever to be any more Scalp EGs provided by Italy, then they wouldn't be able to be used inside Russia. It's probably not the end of the world, but still slightly frustrating. And contrary to the source cited in Le Monde, so Le Monde reported the other day about French SAMP-T systems in the Crotale, and it is a bit controversial. They said that SAMP-T, they've run out of munitions, and the Crotale, they've run out of munitions, and they don't even make them anymore. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense has stated that their Mamba, the SAMP-T, and the Crotale NG and Mistral surface-to-air missile systems have proven highly efficient in repelling recent massive enemy air attacks. So it appears that they are denying that they've run out of the interceptors. A delegation of French military officials has arrived in Kyiv. Heading the delegation was Lieutenant General Richard One, Director General of the Integrated Structure for Supporting the Combat Capability of Ground Equipment. So another capability coalition. The Ukrainian delegation, blah, 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 blah. The French side was interested in organizing logistical support for the army in conditions of high intensity combat operations, as well as sharing their experience of using the French equipment and weapons that have been transferred to the Ukrainians. Additionally, the guests were interested in the advantages of different types of weapons systems in modern warfare. During the discussion, Lieutenant General Mykola Shevtsov thanked the French government and the people for their unwavering support for Ukraine in its struggle to maintain its sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as logistical assistance provided. He noted that French military equipment was mainly used for the formation of new combat brigades and had proven itself well on the battlefield. The parties also discussed the shift in priorities regarding armaments in modern warfare. Alongside missile weapons and armored vehicles, there is a particular need for various types of drones, electronic warfare equipment, and light vehicles, including pickup trucks, ATVs, and motorcycles, as well as other atypical electronic warfare equipment used in military operations. Now, I think interesting that ATVs and motorcycles, they're interested in getting a whole load of them. The Russians have been using them. Like I said before, the Russians have used them out of necessity because they're running out of decent kit, but they found that these pieces of light equipment can convey an advantage. 20 people on motorcycles is a harder thing to hit than 20 people on a single APC. So there have been some advantages for the Russians in using these, and the Ukrainians are looking on and going, yeah, actually, they're really pissing us off that they're using these motorcycles and quads in this way. So let's get our hands on some motorcycles and quads. And then that's what they're saying to the French, it appears there. Now, the French have also said that the General Staff of the Armed Forces, well, no, the Ukrainians have confirmed that France has trained now 18,000 Ukrainian soldiers since the beginning of the war. So that is pretty impressive from the French. Lots of nations involved in training: Poland, Germany, France, UK as well. And there's Operation Interflex in the UK, where you have a whole host of nations helping to train Ukrainian soldiers in the UK. So, for example, you've got Kiwis, I think Kiwis, Aussies, Canadians, maybe Scandinavians as well. And we've also been training Marines and Special Forces, I think, in the UK too. So that is, anyway, all good news from France. I think France is, really trying to step up. Still some grumblings about matching rhetoric with, tangible aid. Sometimes difficult to know what the French give because they don't announce it as much as other nations. So it's easy to think maybe they're doing not as much, but maybe they are, but also maybe they're not. They have said that any obsolete equipment goes automatically, or at least Ukraine get first dibs on them. So, for example, their VAB armored personnel carriers are being phased out at the moment, and all of them appear to be going to Ukraine. So they end up being on these loss lists at regular periods. So Gen Consensus as well, being very useful today, Jen. Thank you. Ukraine is buying powerful street legal motorcycles that can carry 2 men plus 40 to 50 kilograms of cargo, not cheap, low-powered Chinese dirt bikes. Russia makes its soldiers buy the vehicles themselves. Yeah, this is something we have heard. And yeah, it's interesting to see that that Ukraine has started that formal bike unit. It's like modern day cavalry, isn't it? Really is. These are, steel horse. On a steel horse I ride. I don't want to break into a bit of Bon Jovi from Slippery When Wet, but I might do if I have much more beer. Excellent. Welcome, Sally Luz. Greetings to JP and friends. I'm so glad I decided to pick up my phone and look at it. So I found out you were live. I am indeed live. I'm not dead. I am alive. I am live. Okay. So as we sort of come almost to the end of the Ukrainian aid, we go to Canada next. The European defense companies are absolutely loving Trump, says Jay in Kyiv, with the news that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, says he wants Canada to join major European defense plans. So that's the rearm, the EU rearm plan, which involves initially 150 billion euros of funding that, as we saw right at the beginning of the video, rising to potentially 800 billion. Now, the thing is, we had this with the UK. If the UK wants to get involved in access to that funding so that BAE Systems, for example, can get a contract to help rearm European nations, which would be great for business in the UK, then that had to become part of our trade deal with the EU. So we desperately wanted that to happen. These are lucrative contracts, and we had to basically compromise on fishing rights for a further something like 12 years or something like that. And everyone got people who wanted to get annoyed about that got annoyed about it. So, for example, Reform and the Conservatives got annoyed about it because Labour had done that. The reality is our fishing industry is actually very small. Like, it's something like 0.3% of GDP. I think that's right, is it? It's a very small percent. I mean, it's meaningful. I'm not dismissing our fishing industry. It's important. But there's some interesting facts about the UK fishing industry. We ended up, part of the reason why there are so many European vessels that have traditionally been accessing our waters, and that became rather controversial, is because our fishermen sold the rights, right? So we had all these licenses, and rather than fishing them ourselves, our own fishing fleets were selling off the licenses to Europeans, as far as I understand it. So we end up complaining about the Europeans, but it was us that sold them the rights to do that. So these things are often more complicated than they appear at first glance. Anyway, my larger point is that this will probably have to be part of a wider trade deal between Canada and the EU. That, Carney Canada's not just going to be able to waltz into Brussels and go, right, let's have a go at some of those contracts. Very nice, thank you very much. So we know that Canada is going to be, or is trying to move closer to Europe and further away from dependence on the United States, because Donald Trump is being an absolute numbnut. And this is one way, rather like, in fact, this is entirely analogous to what Starmer has done with the UK, which is, how do we get close to Europe? Well, primarily at the moment, defense. We did that. Carney appears to be doing that too. So Carney, this is coming from CBC. Carney says Canada is looking to join major European military buildup by July the 1st. So 75 cents of every dollar of capital spending for defense goes to United States. That's not smart, he said. Canada has been engaged in talks with the European Union since Carney took office before the spring federal election about joining the plan, which foresees the nations on the continent spending $1.25 trillion, so that's Canadian dollars, on defense over the next 5 years. Quote, we're making great progress on that, and by Canada Day, we'd like to see something concrete there. Not long after the Prime Minister made the pitch for closer defense cooperation with Europe, US President Trump took to Truth Social to say that his administration was negotiating with Canada about joining his Golden Dome. But of course, when he did that, he slagged off like Canada. He said, like, you can have this for free if you're part of our 51st, if you are 51st state type thing. So like the way that Trump goes about like negotiations is just very bullying. Anyway, the Golden Dome missile defense system, which will, quote, will cost $61 billion if they remain a separate, here it is, remain a separate but unequal nation, but will cost $0, all caps, if they become our cherished 51st state. They are considering the offer, with many people saying, no, they weren't considering the offer. Carney, in his own Oval Office meeting with Trump, had made it clear that Canada was not interested in joining the US. So yeah, that along with a hike in defense spending in Canada aligned with US, it turns, I mentioned the UK Strategic Defense Review, that, as far as I understand, is seeking to have British defense expenditure rise to 3% of GDP by 2034. I know it sounds like a long way away, but we're kind of incrementally getting there. And at a time when there's no money in the coffers, that's okay, I think. There'll be a lot of people saying it needs to be more, but then now people will also argue that actually no, we need to be spending out on welfare state and X, Y, and Z. So these are difficult considerations, aren't they? But anyway, that I think is coming out of our strategic defense review. Now here, the Canadians are going to have to ramp up because they've long been criticized as being a nation that doesn't spend enough on defense. And in fact, where Trump has got a point is that there are nations obviously that aren't spending the requisite amounts, and Canada is, it appears, one of them. Yes, as someone says, like hell, Canada is considering this, and that's of course with reference to being part of the Golden Dome, which looks to be a massively expensive nuclear missile defense system, like Star Wars type system. Like the 80s Star Wars, not the films. Right, Rochelle, so the Canadian manufacturer, the Senator, MRAP and APC, and it comes in all different shapes and sizes, or different configurations. Rochelle now states that 1,800, although I have also heard 1,000, not 1,800. So, but anyway, I think it's more likely to be 1,800. Rochelle now states that 1,800 Senator family vehicles have been delivered to Ukraine. This is a 100 vehicle increase since their last announcement on the 12th of March 2025, unless that's an American date. That's Jeff from Belgium, so it's likely to be a British date. So if that's the 12th of March, now it's 100 more in the last sort of couple of months. So it's good to see that they are still getting those senators out to Ukraine. Now, let's spend a wee bit of time talking about Israel, and I'll have a little break. Very good. Thank you. The Israeli Ministry of Defense has announced the sale of, and you might recognize that, its entire fleet of approximately 5,000 M113 armored personnel carriers, offering the vehicles in as-is condition to interested buyers. In other words, if they're broken down, tough crap, that's what they're like. So this move is part of Israel's broader effort to modernize its ground forces by phasing out its legacy M113s in favor of more advanced platforms such as the Namer and the Eltan APCs. For Ukraine, the acquisition of this fleet could represent a major opportunity to rapidly expand and standardize its armored mobility. If procured and refurbished, these APCs could equip up to 100 mechanized infantry battalions, dramatically enhancing Ukraine's capacity to move, supply, and protect infantry forces across multiple fronts. Now, to get hold of 5,000 M113s would be pretty useful. Yes, they're old, but they do a decent enough job, and you can upgrade them with turrets and bits and pieces. but also you can use them for spares for all the ones they do already have, because they've been given a lot of M113s by not just the United States, but a lot of different countries. I'd love to know the exact number of M113s they had. I'm sure Oryx has this on their site somewhere, but if any of you have some Googling to you, let us know in the live thread how many M113s they've already been given since the beginning of the war. But it's a lot, right? So another 5,000 would be super useful, even though ideally you'd like 5,000 Bradleys, right? But you're not going to get 5,000 Bradleys, although, that would be good, wouldn't it? Right, staying on Israel, Israeli laser air defense has successfully shot down enemy drones. It was announced today that during the current war, Israeli air defense forces successfully used combat laser systems to intercept aerial targets for the first time. According to the Israel's Ministry of Defense, dozens of enemy targets were destroyed using the Magen or light shield laser system developed by Rafael in cooperation with the defense industry. So now we have heard that South Korea, UK, South Korea, US, Ukraine, possibly with the use of the UK system, not sure, or they've made it their own. At least those four, and actually now China have used laser systems to affect. This is good, right? Take this in the way it is meant. Right, Marjorie Taylor Greene was complaining about Jewish space lasers, and that is pretty clever. Yes, but not the way that Marjorie Taylor Greene has imagined them. Yeah, very interesting point there. Right, now this then moves us on to a very worrying development. And I shared this with you this morning. Russian sources have released footage showing the use of the Chinese low-altitude laser defending system. I would have thought that would have been LADS, but it says LAS here, to shoot down Ukrainian drones in a combat zone. These appear to be the first documented visuals of the Chinese laser system in operational use in Ukraine, and there appears to be footage of them shooting down drones. Now, this is a problem, because if it's true, Russia has received from China. Can you define this as lethal aid? It's certainly military hardware equipment. I think it is a step change from what has previously been provided, and I think there needs to be some ramification to this. There needs to be some pushback from allied nations if China is helping Ukraine in this way. Now, I have long said, I said right at the beginning of this war, in fact, I wrote an article. Unfortunately, all my articles I wrote are no longer online because the organization I wrote for went under. But Benny Pye is hopefully going to, he's building me a website where I've got like 4,000 to 5,000 articles from all my writing life that are going to go up on my website. And one article I wrote for Only Sky at the beginning of the war was that Russia can't win this war. Like straight away, like it all failed, didn't it? And they got stuck in the mud and it all went wrong and they were never going to take Kyiv. So I was like, right, Russia can't win. They can't win the war. The only option I can see for Russia prevailing in the war in anything near maximalist ways would be if they got full-on Chinese help. But I was kind of dismissing that because I don't think China would do that because the US would be on them. Well, the US is in such a weird position now with regard to Russia and with regard to Ukraine that China, I think, are probably feeling emboldened, especially since they're already involved in a trade war with the United States. So I don't know. It's not like, helping Russia a little bit more is going to get sanctions on China, or tariffs on China, because they've already got tariffs on, right? That's already happening, and it's already an embroiled fight, trade fight. But the US isn't too bothered about North Korea, Iran, China helping Russia. I don't think. I'd imagine China are thinking, look, if we're ever going to help Russia, now's the time to do it. Where the allies of Ukraine are all at sixes and sevens because they're not quite sure whether the US is on Ukraine's side or not. And I think that's really, really unfortunate because I imagine we're going to start to see more and more of this. And if China are able to help Russia in these meaningful ways, that bodes very badly for Ukraine, in my opinion. Right, I just want to go back to a couple of points on just seeing if anyone else has made any other points on the M113s, because I asked you if any of you could do a little bit of research. So some of you have said, let's get Viggo. Viggo Holmson says a significant amount of M113 armored personnel carriers from various countries. Sources estimate over 1,500 units donated since 2022. The US alone has provided more than 900. Yep, I know, absolutely. The US has done a really good job to provide these, and they're quite an easy thing to provide because you kind of most places are going to be phasing them out, broadly speaking, or we'll have a lot of them sitting around. Particularly the US there. So yeah, 900 from the US is not surprising at all. 1,500 in total. US has provided 629, says Grunchthing, and other armored vehicles to Ukraine, according to US Department of State AI-driven answer there. So either 900 or 629, I'm not sure, but quite a few, I think, is a general answer there. Thanks for that. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the kind words, Wayne Niles. I so love this channel. Good number one, JP. Thank you, mate. That warms a cockle to my heart, or something like that. Okay, so that brings us. So we've got to the end of the Ukrainian stuff. We're on to Russian stuff now, but I just wanted to, because there was that segue between the Israeli lasers and the Russian, the Chinese lasers that the Russians are using. I thought I would say that. I'm now going to have a swig again of some Australia. Australia, that's a Spanish beer. Sounds like I'm saying Australia, mate. Australia. Yeah. Anyway, whatever. Okay, a few thanks that I think you guys deserve from me. Thank you to Richard Bennett, as ever. Always giving it the ATP memberships. I was in bed the other night thinking about a poll I'm going to ask the members, and the poll is going to be something like, would you rather give, like, if you could give one of these things, what would it be? And I was thinking out all the different combinations. It'd be something like 1,500 trained troops, ping, like that, just appear like magic, or 6 Gripens, or all the different things. I was thinking something like 500,000 artillery ammunition rounds, or 500 Bradleys. I'm going to do which one of those would you give? And that's going to go to members soon, but I need to remember to actually do it rather than just lie in bed thinking about it and then wake up next day and do my videos. So hey, Finnish guy, good to have you on board as ever. Johnny Christensen, some Danish love. Thank you, my good man. Awesome source. Mark Biscuit, total legend. Say hello to Olena for me. Towards your next bottle of Ukrainian wine, we'll be enjoying one later tonight. Mark and Olena. Oh, that's lovely. I had a really nice Riesling. I don't drink Riesling, generally sweet wine, but actually, because of Ukrainian, we got it from Mark from the little whiskey shop. And I will flash up his shop a bit later because he is stocking Ukrainian wines, and 10% of each of the wines will go, the income from those wines will go to a Ukrainian charity. And I was having a Riesling, and it was actually really nice. It was I was sitting at the end of the garden while the sun was setting, and just had myself a nice glass of Riesling. So thank you very much, Mark. It's really, really kind of you. Paul Gilbert, towards a wine and beer fund. Yes, this is a fund that unfortunately, and my belly does not. My belly will confirm this is a fund that unfortunately does keep going on. If the UK spent more on defence, then the boost to the economy would enable more social expenditure. Yeah, and this is one case for. I mean, it seems weird that me, myself, and I would in 2025 be advocating for spending more on the military-industrial complex. Like the Jonathan MS Pearce of 10 years ago would be turning in his abstract grave the idea that I'm advocating for the military-industrial complex, but actually, when push comes to shove, so this is why some, people in government often say, Keir Starmer said this actually recently, that the security of our nation is our number one concern. And that's right, because if your nation isn't secure, then it doesn't matter if you're going to get your pension or not, because it turns out the country's falling to pieces. So you need a secure nation, and then you can start looking after your nation. So that's absolutely right. So a military-industrial complex is part of the security of the nation. A healthy MIC is, the government can't build enough stuff all on its own to support the security of its nation. So it needs to work with the private industries. And there are going to be complaints about profiteering, but at the end of the day, we need a vibrant military-industrial complex, an innovative complex, in order to put our nation's security first. Right, thank you very much to Kevin Forst again. Really, really kind, just like Richard Bennett every time a coconut, mate. Really appreciate your support, buddy. And Iyavor Todorov. There was a Pompey player called Todorov who unfortunately got injured. He did his leg in quite seriously, and did he have to give up, or was he a Bulgarian international? And he played for Pompey, when we were at our height in the Premiership, and he was great. Todorov, loved him. Toddy. Trump said he wants to have Canada join the Golden Dome. He might as well have asked us to adopt the Trump meme coin as a national currency. Yeah, well said. So obviously that didn't go down well in Canada by all accounts. Yes. So interesting, Viggo Holmson. I do my part by buying shares in military-industrial complex companies. My shares in KAD have quintupled in value in just 1.5 years. Do you know what? If I was somebody who was involved in like stocks and shares and whatnot, which I'm not, obviously, I'm not that kind of guy. But if I was, I don't know what I mean, but I'm not that kind of guy. I don't have the disposable income or whatever. Whatever. Do you know what? I did have shares when I was like 16, when I was a kid, and then into young adulthood, because my dad had got shares for me, and then I eventually sold them all. Spent it on beer, no doubt. But my goodness, if you were shrewd, like investing in defense companies in 2021 would have given you an awesome return on investment, I can well imagine. Yeah. And so, as someone says, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is a new American experience. Please read Eisenhower's farewell address to the nation. Actually, I did read that. I read paragraphs from that with regard to the industrial, because I remember, if I remember correctly, because it's some time ago I read them, you could read, if you just took part of Eisenhower's address, you could read it as a bit of a cautionary tale about the military-industrial complex. But actually, if you read it as a whole, it's like, no, we need it. And yeah, so yeah, but good reference there. What does Omnipresent have to say? Jonathan, if you knew that UK being in the EU would give more possibilities for Ukraine to defend Europe from Russia, would you be up for joining UK joining the EU? I don't even need that yes, no, counterfactual. The answer is yes. I'm massively up for the UK being in the EU. I as many of you know, as I keep saying, I debated in public leaving the EU. Actually, I debated for Remain several times, once on my own, once as part of a panel. And in fact, you can go and see one of those debates. Unfortunately, the panel debate, which is before Brexit, wasn't recorded, and I'm gutted about that. It is a great debate, that great panel. And everything I said in that has basically come true. And that's kind of like, yeah, I told you so. But the second one is on the channel. It's on my other channel, my philosophical channel. I uploaded it just a couple of weeks ago to this one. It's from 2018, and we debated Brexit in the media. So you can go and watch that. But the answer to that is yes, mate. Absolutely, 100%. I just think, so you got to work together. So global cooperation solves global problems, and I'm really worried at the moment that these empires around the world, like the Chinese, the Russian, and the American kind of scare quotes, empires are seeking to destabilize Europe because Europe, or the EU, appears to be the only one standing up to, for example, Putin, standing up to massive media companies that are having too much power, and there is important regulation that is aimed at those companies to stop them from taking advantage of us. And I think only when you can work together in those ways across countries because we live in a globalized world, whether you like it or not, we have multinationals that are working across borders, and we live in a virtual world now where borders mean nothing. So, and you got VPNs. So, you know, who gets to control what is coming into your house, into your head through the internet? If we're not careful, then our lives will be controlled by those media entities. And we need to be very wary about the kind of power that they are getting. And I did a video on Elon Musk earlier today. I advise you go and watch it. And it leads to the fact that, yeah, Elon Musk might be on drugs and might be doing all this and might, be essentially kicked out the White House now and gone his own way. But he's got everything he wants, which is Trump to get in, him to scrape all the data from the American government, and then to give that data to his mate Peter Thiel at Palantir. That's all happened. He can rub his hands now and just walk away and go and concentrate on Tesla again and try and resurrect Tesla in the knowledge that he's got one of the biggest, he's done one of the biggest data mining projects in the history of humanity. And we have these tech oligarchs, particularly these South African tech oligarchs, who are ruling the roost at the moment. And, I look at someone like the EU as being the only entity that is standing up in a democratic world. Now, you can argue that in China and Russia, they can shut these systems down, to not allow those international tech entities to have purchase within those nations. But what China does instead is it has its own state-run data control of the population in a more centralized manner. Whereas, Palantir is getting these contracts using kind of free market methods to gain that power. China just does it through the central government. So functionally the same, right? And it's just, scary times, I think, for us. And we need to be able to do something about that. Yes. I'm talking about sort of social media and tech companies and whatnot when I'm speaking in this context. Okay, so let's get back to talking about Russian aid or aid to Russia. So I mentioned, I think yesterday in my geopolitics video, that Serbia has been on the receiving end of some criticism from Russia because their intelligence agencies are claiming that Serbia is still supplying Ukraine with ammunition for, I don't know, mortars, artillery, so on and so forth. The Serbians have, or Vucic, the president, has shot back with, "We only work for Serbia," and he's denied Moscow's claims of Serbian companies supplying ammunition to Ukraine. Or at least, like, if you look at his words, some are saying he was very careful to say, the Czech initiative were in contact with them, but they didn't send any stuff to them. But he didn't necessarily deny that he got ammunition to Ukraine. So it depends how you interpret his words. But Serbia, very much in a Russian sphere of influence, but also they'd be happy to sell stuff, I guess, and to make money out of selling stuff for Ukraine. So I don't know. I wouldn't trust Vucic as far as I could throw him. And with my weenie arms, I wouldn't throw him far at all. Jakub Janowski from Oryx here. What's he saying? Well, we hear. So yes, this is the news that China has stopped selling drones to Kyiv and other European nations while continuing shipments to Russia, according to Bloomberg, citing President Zelensky. Quote, "Chinese Mavics is open for they're open for Russians but closed for Ukrainians. There are production lines on Russian territory where there are Chinese representatives. president told a group of reporters. A European official said that Zelensky's remarks matched their own assessments and added that China also appears to have curtailed deliveries to Western buyers of some drone components, such as magnets used in motors, at the same time as ramping up deliveries to Russia. I am worried at the moment that Russia is really having a bit of a better period of things, because the US has taken a foot off sanctions implementation and enforcement, and they're basically giving Russia as much headroom as they possibly can, elbow room as they can. They're trying to help Russia out as much as possible. Meanwhile, China, as mentioned earlier, is using that as an excuse, this kind of chaos in the unity of support for Ukraine, as an opportunity to supply as much as stuff as they can to Russia. Meanwhile, it appears that they're cutting down drone provision to the West and to Ukraine. Jakub Janovsky says, this looks like irrelevant restrictions that just results in military buyers using middlemen and paying a few percent extra, a lot like Russian buys of civilian products not officially shipped there. Yeah, I would actually think that it possibly is a little bit worse. And I just think China are helping out Russia a lot more than we would like them to be able to. So next are reports on the same thing here. China halts drone sales to Ukraine but keeps supplying them to Russia, according to Zelensky. China, for its part, maintains it's never supplied weapons to either Ukraine or Russia and claims to strictly regulate dual-use goods. I mean, a load of nonsense. I mean, lots of Mavic drones end up in both Russia and China, in both Russia and Ukraine. Sorry, we know that. We see them being used all the time. So, yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't know what strictly regulate means then. What else? So I will block. Oh yeah, this is again back to the Serbian situation. Putin continues winning the lottery, says Jay in Kyiv. China no longer selling drones to Ukraine, but will continue selling to Russia. Italy won't allow Ukraine to strike Russian territory with Italian weapons. Serbia will cut off Ukraine's ammo. Now, I don't know if he's probably being somewhat overreacting here, although, you know, prima facie, this is not great. But I don't know that Serbia will cut off Ukraine's ammo if they're making a pretty penny out of it. I reckon, but this is just me completely being speculative. I would assume they'll try and keep that going while trying to appease Russia as much as possible as well. I don't think Italy's position really changes anything, and it's a position they've held already since, you know, whenever we knew about this. Whenever they provided scalps, we already knew that they weren't going to allow them to be used deep into Russia. But that Chinese drone situation, I think, is a problem. But there certainly is this idea that Putin is winning everything at the moment. He's winning on the political battlefield. He's winning in the United States. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the presidential election. Goodness me, is that happening? Oh, Polish presidential election. I've been out of it. What's been going on there? Is that I thought it was taking place this weekend. Is it not? Anyway, let me know if you have an idea about that. I'm just looking on the news, not seeing anything there. World politics, Europe. Yeah, not seeing anything about Poland. Polish presidential candidates neck and neck on eve of runoff vote. So, yeah, I did see. So, in Poland's previous election in 2020, the Conservative populist incumbent Andrzej Duda narrowly won the second round vote against the pro-Europe mayor of Warsaw. So, Duda beat Trzaskowski by 51% to 49%. Back in 2020, and now Trzaskowski and Nawrocki are neck and neck on the eve of the runoff. So yeah, polls are very close. That is not good news, because it's, yeah, I can easily put forward a case that Nawrocki, with the support of the US and Russia, actually, goodness me, that's a position we're in these days. With the support of those two nations, and probably China as well, is gonna. I can easily build up a case that he would win that. But hopefully, Trzaskowski, who when I last saw the polls, he was like 1% up, was he? But anyway, neck and neck effectively. It's scary stuff. Right. So yeah, as I was saying earlier, though, I just get the sense that Putin is winning everything at the moment, and it's about time that he gets a bloody nose or more. Right. Good to know. Pandemonium meltdown. I don't support this Novrotsky guy. Good, nor do I. But then I don't get a vote. Russia launched, says War Translated, a new jet-powered strike drone, the Dan M, in an attack on Ukraine from Crimea. Now, there was a video of a jet drone over the Black Sea, I think near Odessa, that was shot down by an R-73 air-to-air missile used in a surface-to-air missile mode. And I was wondering whether this was a jet drone that it was shooting down, or whether it was a jet-powered Shahed that there are rumors that are in existence. Originally a target drone for air defense training, it's been modified for strikes. The Dan M has a flight time of 25 to 40 minutes, speeds of up to 400 to 750 kilometers an hour, and operates at altitudes of up to 9 kilometers. So pretty high there. That is a real worry for the Ukrainians again. And North Korea has sent Russia at least 100 ballistic missiles last year, according to monitors. Illegal arms transfers contributed to Moscow's ability to increase its missile attacks against Ukrainian cities, including targeted strikes against critical civilian infrastructure. And yet we do very little about North Korea supporting. Really, really shameful, I think. And there's one thing to say, look, maybe we're not being hard on North Korea because they're helping troops inside Russia in the Kursk region, but they're not actually coming into Ukraine. Yeah, but their weapons are. Those ballistic missiles are hitting Ukrainian cities. And yet North Korea seems to not be on the political radar, as far as I can see. Now, more details have emerged of the price Russia pays for North Korea's support, says Tim White, and I said this the other day. Monitors say at least one Pantsir air defense system and a combat vehicle have been given to Pyongyang in the last 6 months. The report says North Korea has supplied 100 ballistic missiles as well as troops and shells. So the North Koreans get this. Now, what's important about this is that this contravenes the UN sanctions. Like Russia sits on the UN Security Council, right? Having a permanent membership there, and yet here they are contravening UN sanctions and resolutions by supplying military equipment to North Korea. It's absolutely outrageous, and yet the UN appears to be absolutely toothless. Gen Consensus again here says Iran has also sent 200 medium-range ballistic missiles to Russia. They used to kill civilians and burn down, I don't know, infrastructure. Yeah, absolutely. So Iran too. Okay. As we meander towards the end of this section, Russia has provided North Korea with the Pantsir air defense system, as Briefly News says. Electronic warfare equipment and other forms of military assistance, a clear violation of UN sanctions. Since November 2024, Moscow has transferred at least one mobile Pantsir air defense system and one combat vehicle of the same class to Pyongyang, according to the report by the Multilateral Sanctions Monitoring Team, MSMT, which is distributed by South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The findings are based on intelligence data, other classified information, as well as input from independent research institutes. I think that is... it is a problem. Now, Russians in Crimea, according to the spokesman for the Ukrainian Navy, Platenchuk, Russians in Crimea continue to dismantle old ships for scrap metal in order to sell the metal. A ship is a large amount of metal, and these are different. There are different metals there, not only ferrous metals. There is a queue of companies that want to dispose of this material. So I presume they are going to be taking a whole lot of metal in from scrapping these ships in Crimea and then using that metal to either build new military hardware, maritime hardware, or new tanks and bits and pieces. So, yeah, bit of a shame there. And we hear from NOR reports According to, anyway, the search group C4ADS, Russia paid Iran $104 million in gold for Shahid drones to avoid dollar transactions under sanctions, according to the research group C4ADS. Payments were also made in UAE dirhams via a Dubai bank, and Iranian entities may have used crypto as well. So there are ways around this. We know that the Russians have utilized, they've absolutely chomped through a load of their gold reserves, and it appears that here is one way that they have used those reserves. So there you go. That is the military aid video for you. I'm just going to move myself back to being in front of you there. Move that over there. Hopefully that was informative. A whole bunch of information just thrown at you, Gatling gun style. Is how I roll. Just seeing if there is anything else to add to what I've said already. No, not really. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Istanbul talks end. I mean, I say interesting. We can predict it all now. On I think June the 2nd. So is that tomorrow? 2 days. Zelensky has come out today and said that he has absolutely no idea what the Russians are going to bring, because they haven't released any draft memorandum to Ukraine or any of the nations involved in the talks, and that is probably not good news. As in, if you really were wanting and expecting peace, I don't think anyone was expecting Istanbul 2.0 to bring about any lasting peace proposals or agreements. Yeah, it's just highly unlikely, even more unlikely now that Russia appear to be doubling down on their original maximal claims. We've got Nebenzer in the UN stating that, if you don't agree to our peace, we're going to get Sumy, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Kherson, Odessa, etc., etc. They are being bellicose in their rhetoric, the Russians. They are being maximalist in their demands, and I don't think it's looking at all good for sustained peace agreement. And the only question then is, well, what's Trump going to do about it? I mean, that appears to be the only question on anyone's lips, really. I know people say stop talking about Trump. It's irrelevant, leave him behind. Yeah, I can't stop talking about him because he actually defines the US is so freaking important that what Trump decides has massive ramifications. And if he's too taco weak, Trump always chickens out. This name is just brilliant. I love it because it's going to stick to him. Taco Trump. He calls everyone else by nicknames, and now one has been given to him, and he hates it. He's railed against it, and it's just delightful. But it's true. He's chicken out on everything. He's threatened in the context of stronger people, stronger entities like China, even like Canada and Mexico. He's backed down with them in initial trade negotiations, back down with the EU. Or okay, he's put things back up, but he's like, A, he's all over the shop, but B, he does seem to like back down. I think he backs down because actually the proposals he has are insane. And when he's presented with complaints by industry experts and CEOs, then that's really what causes him to back down. But he backs down on being harsh to Russia every single time. 2 weeks, 2 weeks later, 2 weeks, 2 weeks later, 2 weeks. And it all shows that he is too weak. He is too weak to stand up to Putin. And that just, I think, means that Taco Trump is the perfect name for him. The question is, if nothing comes from this Istanbul meeting, then will he allow the Senate to put forward this bipartisan bill? These two co-sponsors, that is going to be really super harsh on Russia, but also secondary sanctions on China and places for taking cheap Russian hydrocarbons. Will Trump sign that into reality, or will he and the people around him really not want that to be enacted? And I think you've got this tension between the Trump administration and like the serious politicians in the Senate, but you've got a lot of Senate Republicans who are no doubt like fuming inside because of what they've seen over the last 4 months that's not been in line with probably their more Reagan Republicanism. Now, the House of Representatives further down, with people that run for 2 years rather than the 6 years of the Senate, I think you've got a lot more MAGA Republicans there than you do in the Senate. And you're more likely to have support for Trump's agenda in the House of Representatives, less so, I think, in the Senate. But I think you'll get enough support for Ukraine in the House of Representatives as well. So I think Congress would support Blumenthal and Graham's bill. And that is possibly the best hope we have for Trump's America to support Ukraine. But it involves Trump actually agreeing to do that. So, yeah. One Grail says it will be interesting to see the separation of powers actually having meaning in America, because at the moment it looks like, I mean, the unified executive theory, which is where you kind of like, this is what Heritage Foundation with their Project 2025 blueprint were wanting to do, which is kind of concentrate power in the executive, in you know, the White House, if you like, because that's the best way of getting that's the best way of having their vision of what America should be to get through, because it's unlikely to get through Congress. It won't get bipartisan support in a way that it would need to have. So the best way to do that is change things to concentrate power in the executive, in the president, and then get the president to do all these executive orders and ram things through, and then ignore the courts, and then it all goes crazy. I've got a video that I've lined up. I've got it all ready. I can show you. I've got whole browsers of like hundreds of tabs, each browser that's open. And I've got one on the law in the US and what's going on with ICE and Harvard and all sorts. And it's just absolutely incredible what's happening there. And this is a case of, and this is relevant to Ukraine, because you've got Congress clearly, I think, wanting to support Ukraine, but Trump and his lackeys, probably even more so the people around him, not wanting to support Ukraine. And that tension is, I think, obvious for us to see. Yeah. So I was going to show you this, wasn't I? So, because I know Mark from the Little Whiskey Shop is in the house. So let's go to Little Whiskey, because he is selling Ukrainian wines, and that is fantastic. So where are you? Little Whiskey Shop in Stockbridge. So there you go. I'll put a link in the description below. The Little Whiskey Shop in Stockbridge in North Hampshire. So it's only really for UK people. He was selling to the EU, but unfortunately Brexit happened and that stopped that being able to, you know, if you want a real world example of how business can be affected by Brexit, you can ask Mark. So yeah, that had to stop. But I don't know whether the new, it'd be interesting, Mark has a new agreement with, you know, Starmer with the government, and the EU made trade with Europe easier. Can you start thinking about trade with Europe again, or are you still back in not being able to do so? But anyway, he is selling, I think, 6 different wines, a couple of sparklers, a couple of reds, a couple of whites. Go and check them out if you want to support Ukraine. But yeah, as I say, I'll put a link to that in the description. I drove out to Ukraine with Mark, and we shared Babs, the Barbarian L200, Mitsubishi L200, beautiful vehicle, did a good job. Mark was an amazing driving companion, did a fabulous job out there. driving and all over Ukraine, or certainly the West. And we unfortunately saw that vehicle that was one that wasn't going to the ATP Geopolitics truck, so it didn't become an ATP truck. It became the Ukrainian truck, but we drove it out there, and that truck was hit by drones. Unfortunately, I showed you footage of that, and that's just the way it goes with these vehicles. But there you go. Okay, look, I really appreciate all of your support, guys. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go and spend some time with my missus. I was going to do this last night, but what happened last night is my son came in. I've got twin boys, 14-year-olds, and he was like, should we do FC 25, which is the old FIFA, used to be called FIFA, the football game on a PlayStation. And we're playing as Wrexham, and we're in the Championship at the moment, and we're looking like we're going to get promoted to the Premiership. So we had a session on that anyway, way past midnight. I was playing with my 14-year-old son. I was like, what kind of parenting is this? Anyway, it stopped me from recording this video, which is why I'm doing the live today. So you can blame Finn for that. Anyway, take care, you all. I am off for some family time. Appreciate all of your support. Thank you to all of those many people who have supported in the live chat: Mark Bisque, Paul, Richard Bennett, Kevin Forst, Ivor Todorov, Ole Nielsen, and Johnny Christensen, etc., etc. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate all the members, as I said at the beginning of the video, and people who support on Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal, because it allows me to keep doing this. And I love. Do you know what? I got multiple sclerosis, had to give up my job. I was a teacher, gave up my job, and had to work from home. And I'm in a position now where I enjoy this job more than any job I've ever had in the world. Like, I am obsessed with the war in Ukraine. I'm obsessed with geopolitics. And I get to speak to you guys, a wonderful community of people, about what I love to talk about. And you guys, for some reason, for some weird reason, you want to listen to me talk about stuff that I'm fascinated with. So, you know, MS, multiple sclerosis, has given, you know, it's taken so much from me. But it's also given a little bit here, so I get to do this, and I'm so thankful for that, and thankful to you guys as well. Thank you to the mods. Take care, y'all, and big love from me. And so, and also, of course, it should go without saying, spare a thought for the Ukrainians. And I'm working out. In fact, I've been contacted by Car for Ukraine. Again, want us to come on board with their summer fundraiser. I've got, look at these wonderful Car for Ukraine pins. I have that drone pin. I've got the medical car pin, and I've got the fire pin there with the trident, the patriot pin, a burning heart with a Ukrainian trident. And I have this one as well, and we've produced at least one vehicle that is this, which is the multiple launch rocket vehicle. Although is that a machine gun on the back there? That's actually got a machine gun, but let's imagine that's the multiple launch rocket. Anyway, Car for Ukraine want us to come on board with their summer campaign, and I'm just working out with JR whether we're going to do that or something different. I was actually somebody reached out from another organization that wanted some help with some fundraising and whatnot. So we just had to see. Car for Ukraine are amazing. Car for Ukraine MRS. So go and check back on my Car for Ukraine videos. Just search for Car for Ukraine in or go to look at my video output pandemonium, and you'll see one of the vehicles we fundraise for have the back taken off and 3 or 4 multiple launch rocket tubes placed on the back, and we've actually seen them being fired as well, because they sent us a video of them being fired. So yeah, actually we have at least one of our vehicles, maybe 2 of them have been turned into them. So I'm so happy to, in fact, this is a Car for Ukraine t-shirt, which I absolutely love. Thanks to Ivan, who sent me this the other day. And I have these badges on my patch, these patches on my patch display, which I need to put up somewhere. But this one here is a car for Ukraine one, and this one here is a car for Ukraine one. And yeah, so Ivan sent me then, and so more than happy to work with them. But I guess we'll see what JR says, and we'll have a look. Anyway, this is a typically long and ridiculous goodbye. It's taken me 10 minutes already, so I really will say goodbye. Goodbye. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.